Walk into almost any pharmacy, grocery store, or big box retailer, and the vitamin aisle gives you the same reassuring lie. Bright colors, clean white bottles, words like complete, essential, immune, organic, doctor trusted, clinically backed, whole food, premium. It all looks calm, responsible, smart, and that is exactly why this category fools so many people. Because vitamins do not usually get sold like high-risk products. They get sold like tiny acts of self-respect. A bottle in the cart feels like discipline. A gummy in the morning feels like you did something right. A shiny capsule with a premium label feels like you chose health over neglect. But the gap between that feeling and what you are actually buying can get very wide, very fast. In this category, the biggest problem is not always a dramatic ingredient headline. Sometimes, it is something quieter than that. A weak formula hiding behind a trusted brand, a candy delivery system pretending to be a serious supplement, a premium product charging luxury pricing for basic nutrition, a store label giving you no real reason to trust where anything came from. And once you start seeing those patterns, the whole aisle changes. So in this countdown, we are not ranking these brands by how famous they are or by who has the loudest commercials. We are ranking them by trust gaps, formulation shortcuts, label logic, and the distance between the image they sell and the clarity they actually give the buyer. Then we are flipping it and getting into 6 brands that tend to earn far more respect from doctors, pharmacists, and label-conscious shoppers who care less about hype and more about what is actually in the bottle. And before we get into the countdown, one thing matters. This is not about pretending every brand on the avoid list is automatically dangerous, or that every product from a better brand is perfect for every person. That is not how supplements work, and it is not how smart buying works either. This is about something more practical. If you are spending money in this aisle, where are you most likely to get transparency, sensible formulation, and a product that feels like it was made to solve a real nutritional need, instead of win a shelf battle? Because that is the real issue here. Most people are not comparing certificates, excipient choices, bioavailability questions, or testing standards while standing under fluorescent lighting, with a cart half full of cereal and paper towels. They are buying on trust. They are buying on packaging. They are buying on brand memory. And in vitamins, that can be a very expensive habit. At number 12, Ollie. And Ollie lands here because it may be one of the cleanest examples of modern supplement marketing beating supplement seriousness. The branding is excellent. Soft colors, friendly language, a mood board version of wellness. The bottles look like they belong next to skincare, not fish oil and calcium. For a lot of shoppers, that makes the product feel safer, simpler, almost curated. But when a vitamin brand leans this hard into lifestyle design, you have to ask what exactly you are paying for. In many of these products, the delivery format is doing a lot of the selling. Gummies, chewables, taste-forward formulas, pleasant textures, easy routines. That is great for compliance, but it also moves the product closer to confectionery logic than clinical logic. Sugar, flavoring, texture agents, color decisions, and shelf appeal start becoming part of the package. And once the product is built to be craved, rather than simply tolerated, you are not just buying nutrients anymore, you are buying a wellness candy system. That may sound harsh, but it matters. A vitamin should first answer a formulation question. Too often, brands like this answer a branding question. The bottle says modern health. The product often says modern convenience. Those are not the same thing. Number 11 is Vitafusion, and this one represents a category problem more than a single villain problem. Gummy vitamins built an empire by solving one very human issue. Adults do not love swallowing pills, and parents do not love battling with their kids over them. So the market responded with sweetness, softness, and candy store compliance. But the closer a supplement gets to candy behavior, the more carefully you should read it. With gummy-first brands, the experience is usually the lead story. Texture, flavor, easy to take, enjoyable. And that sounds harmless until you realize how much of the product's identity is wrapped around being pleasant rather than being precise. You do not get seriousness from a bottle just because the label says multivitamin. You get seriousness from sensible dosage strategy, stable delivery, strong manufacturing confidence, and a formula that does not feel like it had to negotiate with a candy department before it reached the shelf. The deeper issue here is psychological. Gummies make people less skeptical. They feel lighter, less pharmaceutical, more everyday. And that can make buyers ask fewer hard questions. What forms are being used? How much sugar am I normalizing in a health ritual? What is the point of taking something daily if the entire experience is built around tasting good first? That trust gap is why gummy-heavy brands stay low on the list for serious buyers. At number 10, Centrum. This is where legacy trust starts becoming a problem. Centrum has been around long enough that millions of shoppers do not even think of it as a decision anymore. It feels pre-approved by familiarity. It feels like the default answer, and that is exactly what makes it worth questioning. Legacy multivitamin brands built their reputation in an era when broad coverage itself felt impressive. Long label, lots of percentages, a little bit of everything, just take one and move on with your day. But once you start reading multivitamin labels with a sharper eye, that kitchen sink logic stops looking elegant and starts looking blunt. Not because broad formulas are automatically bad, but because they often create the illusion of full nutritional confidence when the real picture is much messier. Some nutrients matter more in certain forms. Some buyers do not need high amounts of certain vitamins at all. Some formulas look busy without being especially thoughtful, and yet the brand power remains enormous, because the bottle signals something comforting. Complete. But complete is one of those words that can do a lot of emotional work without telling you much about quality. A brand like Centrum is powerful because it lets people outsource the whole question. And whenever a brand's greatest strength is helping you stop asking questions, that is where the countdown gets serious. Number 9 is One a Day. Different bottle, same trap, but with an even stronger convenience pitch built into the name itself. One pill, one solution, one easy act of responsibility. It is brilliant marketing because it turns nutritional complexity into a clean little daily ritual. But the body is not a slogan, and neither is a supplement aisle. The problem with broad one-size-fits-all multivitamin branding is not that it is evil, it is that it is lazy. It encourages buyers to treat nutrition like a checkbox instead of a context issue. Men's formula, women's formula, over 50. Prenatal, energy, immune, bone. You get the sense of personalization without always getting the depth of formulation logic that real personalization would require. And once again, the shelf confidence is doing the heavy lifting. Big familiar name, massive retail distribution, immediate recognizability. But if you strip away the familiarity, what are you looking at? Usually a formula built to satisfy category expectations, not necessarily to impress the most skeptical label reader in the room. Here is the quick verdict. When a brand's biggest promise is simplicity, make sure simplicity is not just another word for, please do not look too closely. At number 8, Nature's Bounty. This is one of those brands that thrives in the exact zone where shoppers stop being fully alert. Not the ultra-cheap bargain basement zone. Not the ultra-premium clinical zone. Right in the middle. Familiar enough to feel established, broad enough to feel versatile, affordable enough to feel reasonable, and polished enough to look reliable. That middle zone is where a lot of vitamin money disappears. Because shoppers start assuming the brand has already crossed some invisible seriousness threshold. But broad retail presence is not the same thing as deep transparency, and a giant catalog is not the same thing as formulation discipline. When a brand sells everything to everyone, the question becomes whether the line is built around nutritional rigor or around occupying as much shelf space as possible. And too often, brands like this feel like shelf managers first and trust builders second. One product leans basic, another leans trendy, another leans beauty, another leans sleep, another leans immune. The catalog becomes a mood board of whatever shoppers currently worry about. The issue is not variety by itself. The issue is when variety starts feeling like a strategy to catch every passing concern, rather than a sign that the brand knows exactly what it wants to stand for. Nature's Bounty is not number 8, because it is the worst brand in the aisle. It is number 8, because it is the kind of brand buyers stop scrutinizing too early. Number 7 is Spring Valley, and this is where value shoppers need to pay attention, because store brand vitamins create one of the most seductive equations in retail. Same nutrient names, lower price, bigger bottle, problem solved. On paper, that sounds smart. In practice, private label supplements often ask the buyer to accept the thinnest trust story in the entire aisle. Who exactly made this? What standards are you relying on beyond the store name itself? What does consistency look like across batches, across suppliers, across product lines? And how much of the low price comes from true efficiency versus a product designed simply to hit a cost target? Now, not every store brand supplement is automatically a bad buy. Some can be perfectly serviceable, especially when they carry meaningful verification marks. But when you are shopping the cheapest end of a category, where the average person already struggles to evaluate quality, you are betting that the store's reputation alone is enough to answer deeper manufacturing questions. Sometimes it is. Sometimes it is just good shelf psychology. The bottle looks plain, practical, no nonsense. It makes you feel like the smart consumer who skipped the branding tax. But low drama does not equal high clarity, and in vitamins, the cheapest bottle can become expensive if the real thing you bought was uncertainty. Number 6 is GNC's house brand universe. This is where the supplement aisle starts sounding loud: performance, mega, ultra, burn, power, men's health, women's vitality, stacks, systems, goals. It is a very different kind of trust problem from the soft pastel gummy brands, but it is still a trust problem. Here the illusion is not gentle wellness. It is aggressive effectiveness. The message is basically, why take a simple formula when you could take a more intense one, with more ingredients, bigger numbers, and a name that sounds like it belongs on gym equipment. But more is not a synonym for better. Bigger dosages are not the same thing as better designed products. Complex blends are not the same thing as more thoughtful formulas, and heavy supplement retail culture has a way of making buyers feel undersupplemented, unless they are taking something dramatic. That is a powerful sales model. It is not always a great consumer model. What makes this category risky is that intensity itself becomes the marketing engine. The label wants to impress you before it informs you. The product feels advanced because it is crowded. It feels premium because it is specialized. But crowded formulas can make label reading harder, value analysis weaker, and buying logic fuzzier. A serious vitamin should not need to shout at you to justify its existence. Halfway through, pause on the bigger pattern because it matters. The worst vitamin brands do not always look reckless. Some look playful. Some look classic. Some look affordable. Some look high performance. Some look premium. Different costumes, same category problem. They are selling confidence faster than they are earning it. And if you have bought any of these for years, that does not mean you made some reckless mistake. It means you bought them the way almost everyone buys supplements, by trusting the shelf to do the filtering for you. But the shelf is not filtering for your benefit. It is filtering for movement. It rewards the bottle that gets grabbed, not the bottle that survives a skeptic's 10 hardest questions. That is why the top 5 matter more, because this is where the branding gets even more persuasive. At number 5, Smarty Pants. This brand is fascinating because it sells itself like the reasonable compromise. Better than the childish gummy, more elevated than the sugary drugstore option. Still pleasant, still easy, still attractive, but with a more premium parent-friendly image. And that is exactly what makes it slippery. The brand understands that modern buyers want the emotional convenience of a gummy without feeling like they are buying candy in disguise. So it wraps the entire offer in smart design, family positioning, and a cleaner-feeling identity. But once again, the delivery format is doing a huge amount of work. If your primary selling advantage is that people enjoy taking your vitamin, you still have to answer the same old question: is the formula impressive enough to justify the compromises that come with taste-driven supplementation? The more a brand invests in making the supplement delightful, the more carefully I want the buyer to think about whether delight is the thing they should be paying for. Add the premium pricing that often comes with this style of branding, and now the issue is not just formulation. It is value integrity. You are paying more to feel like you are buying a smarter gummy. Maybe you are, but a smarter gummy can still be a gummy-first purchase dressed up as a better decision. The bottle whispers quality. The actual logic often says convenience with nicer typography. Number 4 is Mary Ruth's. This is where the wellness aisle starts feeling almost spiritual. Liquid formulas, dropper bottles, family-friendly branding, social media visibility, a soft promise that the product is somehow more intuitive, more natural, more alive than the old-school bottle of tablets your parents kept in the cabinet. And to be fair, that aesthetic is powerful because it taps into something real. A lot of shoppers are tired of industrial-feeling supplements. They want products that look cleaner, gentler, less synthetic. But a clean-looking bottle is not the same thing as a cleaner buying decision. Brands like this often thrive on emotional trust signals that feel highly modern: transparency language, routine culture, simplicity visuals, reassuring storytelling. Yet the more a brand becomes a lifestyle object, the more important it is to separate the serenity of the brand from the clarity of the formula. Are you buying a genuinely more rational supplement, or are you buying relief from the ugly old supplement world? That is not the same purchase, and liquid wellness products can be especially persuasive because they feel more active, more absorbable, more premium, more intentional. But feels like more, and is meaningfully better, are two very different standards. When a vitamin brand makes you feel calm before it makes you informed, that is not necessarily trust. Sometimes it is just very advanced packaging. Number 3 is Garden of Life. This one is tricky because it sits in one of the most powerful trust zones in the entire category: the health halo zone, organic language, whole food language, earth-toned packaging, a moral atmosphere around the product. This is the kind of brand people reach for when they are not just buying nutrients. They are trying to avoid the industrial weirdness of the supplement aisle altogether. They want the bottle that feels closer to farms than factories, closer to ingredients than chemistry, closer to purity than mass production. And again, I understand why that works. But this is exactly where buyers need to slow down. Because in supplement marketing, natural identity can become a substitute for technical scrutiny. A bottle can feel more honest because the visual language is earthy. It can feel more trustworthy because the wording suggests food rather than manufacturing. But feeling closer to nature is not the same thing as giving the buyer clearer information, better value, or a more sensible formula. Sometimes the halo is the product, and when that happens, you are paying for moral comfort as much as nutritional confidence. The label seems to say, relax, this is the enlightened choice. But whenever a brand starts offering emotional innocence in a bottle, that is when skepticism should rise, not fall. The entire category knows how to sell virtue. Very few brands know how to make virtue a substitute for rigorous comparison. At number 2, Ritual. And this one lands so high because it may be the cleanest example of modern premium supplement branding, turning transparency into an aesthetic. Clear capsule imagery, minimal packaging, traceability language, beautifully edited health culture. The whole thing is designed to make the shopper feel like the fog has finally lifted. Like this brand is different because it tells you more, shows you more, hides less. And compared with many chaotic supplement brands, that cleaner presentation can absolutely feel refreshing. But here is the issue: transparency itself has become a style in consumer products. It is no longer just a practice. It is branding. And once transparency becomes branding, buyers have to ask a harder question. Is this clarity actually solving a nutritional problem, or is it simply making premium pricing feel morally justified? Ritual is powerful because it understands the psychology of distrust. It knows modern shoppers are suspicious of clutter, suspicious of vague blends, suspicious of old-school multivitamin noise. So it offers the opposite: stripped-down confidence. But stripped-down confidence can still be expensive confidence. It can still be selective confidence. It can still be the kind of product where the identity feels more advanced than the practical buying logic. When a bottle looks this self-aware, this design-literate, this consumer-conscious, a lot of people stop interrogating the price, the formula strategy, and the actual value proposition. That is the danger. Not ugliness, elegance. And number 1 is Herbalife. Because if the entire point of the vitamin aisle is to help buyers make calm, rational, informed decisions, this is the brand ecosystem that pulls the category furthest away from that ideal. The problem here is not just what is inside a single bottle. The problem is the environment around the bottle: distribution culture, recruitment culture, stack selling culture, community pressure, business incentives mixed with product loyalty. Once a supplement system is tied to that kind of ecosystem, the buyer is no longer just evaluating a label. They are evaluating a sales structure. And that is where vitamin trust can get truly distorted. The product is no longer standing on formulation clarity alone. It is standing inside an atmosphere of persuasion, testimonials, transformation language, system logic, the feeling that buying more, combining more, joining more, is part of the answer. That is where the category stops behaving like straightforward consumer nutrition and starts behaving like a belief machine. And belief is expensive, especially when it comes dressed as personal coaching, community support, and wellness entrepreneurship. Here is the blunt truth. A vitamin should never require a social system to feel credible. It should not need a culture around it to justify itself. It should survive the most boring possible test, bottle in hand, label in view, ingredient logic on the table, value comparison side by side. The moment a supplement becomes harder to separate from the selling structure around it, trust drops hard. That is why Herbalife takes the top spot. Now here is the relief pivot, because this is where a lot of people get fatigued and say, fine, so what am I supposed to buy then? And that is the right question. Not because there is one magic brand everyone needs, but because the better end of this category tends to look a lot less exciting than the worst end. The brands doctors, pharmacists, and skeptical label readers tend to respect more, usually do not win by looking cute, loud, or morally superior. They win by being boring in the right ways. Better testing reputation, cleaner labeling, more straightforward formulas, less candy logic, less aesthetic theater, more confidence that the bottle is trying to do a job rather than tell a story. The first better option is nature-made. Not because it is glamorous, and not because every product in the line is the best thing on the shelf, but because boring competence matters. When a mainstream brand gives you plain labeling, broad availability, and products that often carry strong third-party verification marks, that counts for something in a category full of emotional theater. Nature-made tends to appeal to clinicians for one simple reason. It is legible. The shopper is not trying to decode a wellness manifesto. They are buying a straightforward product from a brand that often chooses calm over drama. That is underrated. Next is Kirkland's Signature, especially when you are talking about staple basics. This is one of those rare cases where value does not automatically mean corner-cutting vibes. For common vitamins and minerals, the appeal here is practical confidence. Big bottle, reasonable price, familiar retailer standards, and on many products a reputation for serious verification. It is not stylish, and that is part of the charm. Kirkland does not need to seduce you into believing you joined a health movement. It just needs to make a bottle that makes sense. In vitamins, that kind of humility is refreshing. Then there is Now Foods. This brand tends to earn respect from people who like the supplement world, but hate the performance art inside it. The catalog is large, yes, but the overall identity feels more old-school nutrition nerd than lifestyle influencer. You get a sense that the company expects the buyer to care about ingredients, forms, and categories, not just packaging. That does not make every single product automatically superior, but it does create a stronger baseline trust. The brand feels built for people who read labels on purpose. Above that is life extension. This is where you start getting into a more detail-oriented culture of supplementation. The brand has long appealed to shoppers who want more information, more specificity, and a stronger sense that the formulas were built by people obsessed with the category, rather than people obsessed with shelf appeal. Sometimes that can make the catalog feel dense. Sometimes it can feel a little too supplement world for casual buyers. But if your concern is seriousness, not cuteness, life extension usually feels like it is at least trying to solve the right problem. Then pure encapsulations. Ask people in clinical settings what supplement brands feel cleaner, more straightforward, and more professional, and this name comes up again and again. Part of the appeal is that the brand identity is restrained. Minimal noise, minimal drama, less retail seduction, more practitioner shelf energy. It is not cheap, and that matters. Better does not always mean budget-friendly. But when people are paying this kind of price, at least the value proposition is usually tied to cleaner formulation choices and a more trust-oriented identity, not a candy shell or aesthetic wellness fantasy. And at the top of the recommend side is Thorne, This is the brand that often gets treated as the adult table in the supplement conversation. Again, not because every single bottle is automatically right for every human being, but because the overall trust profile is strong. Serious manufacturing reputation, simple, professional presentation. A brand image that feels like it expects scrutiny, rather than trying to distract from it. Thorn products are often more expensive, and that is a real trade-off. But if you want to understand why some brands get recommended more often by doctors and practitioners, this is the lesson. They usually make it easier to believe the price is paying for standards, not marketing choreography. And this is where the whole title comes back into focus. The real difference between the brands to avoid and the brands more serious buyers gravitate toward is not just one ingredient or one scary label detail. It is the direction of trust. The weak brands ask you to trust the feeling first and the formula second. The stronger brands make the formula feel like the reason the product exists in the first place. That is the lens. Not hype, not fear, not pretty packaging. Direction of trust. So the next time you are standing in that aisle, do not start by asking which bottle looks healthiest. Ask 4 simpler questions. Is this product selling me taste, image, or actual formulation clarity? Does the label make the buying decision easier to understand, or easier to stop thinking about? Am I paying for nutrients, or for branding comfort? And if a doctor had to recommend a brand quickly, would they pick the one with the loudest story, or the one with the fewest red flags? That mental checklist alone will save people a lot of bad supplement spending. Because that is the hidden truth of the vitamin aisle. Most of the worst buys do not feel reckless when you make them. They feel responsible. They feel routine. They feel like the smarter choice. And that is why this matters. If you want the next breakdown, tell me which aisle we should audit next. Protein powders, probiotic brands, collagen, fish oil, kids' vitamins, or those healthy hydration mixes that keep multiplying all over the store. And if you disagree with this ranking, even better. Drop the brand you trust most, the one you stopped buying, or the one sitting in your cabinet right now that you want looked at more closely.